In 2024, the Minnesota Timberwolves went from a stagnant mess to a promising contender, their first real sign of life in nearly 2 decades, and everyone wanted to know what changed. Of course, Anthony Edwards' progression and Rudy Gobert's defense drew the headlines, but there was a quieter kind of stability that brought the symphony to life, a two-way tranquility instituted by the newcomers in the backcourt, Mike Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. For 2 seasons, the complementary floor generals kept the offense humming and the defense connected, but now Minnesota's at a crossroads. Alexander-Walker has moved on to Atlanta, and Conley is gradually losing ground with Father Time. That half-court harmony they found is in danger of disappearing, and their hopes for its reinforcement rely on the smallest player on the roster taking a big step forward. The Timberwolves will need a lot from Rob Dillingham, but then again, that was always the plan. After Luka Doncic cut the lights out in the Target Center, the Wolves took a retrospective look at the breakthrough and the roster that catalyzed it. They saw the advanced numbers, looked through the contracts, and came to a conclusion. In 2 seasons, they were going to lose one of either Mike Conley or Nickeil Alexander-Walker. With their core group of players already established, they wouldn't have room on the books to retain both. And considering what those two meant for the makeup of the team, that was alarming. There was no cap room to sign a free agent, and no draft picks high enough to get a difference maker. So Minnesota did what a proactive franchise does. They found a prospect they believed could be as good or better than their 2 point guards, and traded 2 future first-round picks to go get him. Thankfully, Dillingham was a hit with Timberwolves fans before he set foot in Minnesota, because of one thing no basketball fan can resist romanticizing: a damn creative handle. Every viral clip told the same story: a hang dribble, a blur of crossovers, and some poor algebra student spinning in place, moving to a beat they couldn't catch. In his limited opportunities to dance in the open court, Dillingham made it perfectly clear that shifty wasn't just a cool word social media was tossing around. It was an extremely accurate descriptor of the constantly evolving way he played the game. Unfortunately, like most rookies, Dillingham struggled with consistency and decision making. Getting past the first defender wasn't a problem for John Calipari's last disciple, and it probably never will be. Adjusting to quicker help rotations though, that was an issue. With world-class athletes closing space at warp speed, Dillingham turned the ball over too frequently to be a reliable high-volume distributor. His freelance style kept him from having predictable answers when defenders moved over to cut him off, and his frame limited the passing lanes he could access when he found himself in trouble. Those traits, combined with the natural game speed adjustments necessary for a young point guard, resulted in an unbalanced playmaking profile. With championship aspirations, that variability was a risk that the Timberwolves couldn't afford, especially when they could hand the keys over to the virtual lockbox that is Mike Conley, or plug in Nickeil Alexander-Walker to stabilize both sides of the floor. But we're not going to be depressing for this entire video. If they're as smart as we think they are, the Wolves anticipated this. First birds fly, fish swim, and rookie floor generals turn the ball over. It's what they do. Dillingham will almost certainly be better with the ball in his hands now that he's had a full season to adjust to the speed of the game, and they didn't really need him last year. Besides, there were moments when it all clicked. Early in the season, he dropped 19 points and 8 assists in a hyper-efficient outburst in Utah. A few weeks later, he gave the Grizzlies 15 points on 8 shots in a close loss. Down the road, there was a clutch 12-point performance against the title-winning buzzsaw in Oklahoma. After all, they call him Rob with the... God, what do they call him? there was a reason for optimism. When Dillingham put his head down and got to the rim, he finished efficiently. His ability to invent backboard angles in midair and drop feathery floaters in over rim protectors will keep defenses honest and make those passing lanes easier to find. The next step won't be making those instances of aerial artistry more common. It will be leveraging the threat of those levitating layups to create better opportunities for his teammates. In other words, he's got to let the rhythm come to him a little bit more and play along with it. Sometimes that'll mean a smooth dump off to a big man, but it won't always be a direct assist. Kicking the ball out to keep defenses in rotation and fully resetting the offense when the time calls for it are the boring pieces of the maturation process that will allow Dillingham to go from electrifying to destructive. And an ancient mentor like Mike Conley should certainly help him get there. Don't forget what that guy looked like in Memphis, but that's a video for another time. That live dribble dynamism is a rare weapon on its own, and combining it with the mid-air wizardry we've seen from him on a semi-regular basis is dangerous. All the tools necessary for a game-changing downhill attacker are in place. He just needs to get better at those mundane things to make room for the excitement, with a little more composure on ball and a little less tunnel vision in the lane. Chris Finch should feel perfectly comfortable letting Dillingham run the show every once in a while. That ability to create is great, and when he's leading the second unit, there's a good chance we get to see it shine this season. But when Anthony Edwards is on the court, the ball will be his. That means Dillingham needs to play reactively, not just proactively. He needs to cut and read the defense as it collapses, to make the extra pass most of the game and fake the extra pass later, to drift with the drives and be ready to shoot. All the stuff that left-handed Sheriff did in Utah. We're physically fighting off a Mike Conley edit right now. What is that? Do you hear that noise? And that need for connective skills brings us to the next area of his game in need of improvement: shooting. From a purely statistical standpoint, Dillingham wasn't bad from range last season. Sub 35% isn't ideal, but when a player bends defenses the way we think Dillingham can, it's manageable. That said, there was a distinct split in the way Dillingham shot the ball off the catch and the way he shot the ball off the dribble. As a pull-up shooter, Rob was fantastic. He finished 4th on the team in his pull-up 3 percentage, forcing defenders to work around picks with urgency and further enabling his quickness by demanding that his matchup takes away his airspace. Off the catch, it was a different story. Teams were able to drift away from him before forcing him into a hurried drive off of a closeout, which wasn't the best thing for a player still learning how to play at his own pace in the league. That kind of disparity makes sense for someone who spent their entire career playing on ball. Waiting with your shooting pocket ready and quickly rising into a standstill jumper is a different skill than building a rhythm off the dribble and stepping into a look. Thankfully, he's not the first guard to go through something like this. That 3-point superhero playing beside him in the backcourt began his career with a similarly rough percentage off the catch. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker was someone teams dared to shoot just 2 seasons ago. In other words, it's something that usually improves with time. At Kentucky, Dillingham was a lethal weapon from deep. We know he has the touch and the range to knock down open looks with consistency. In all likelihood, this is a comfortability thing. Contests happen faster in the league, and defenders are rangier. That means shooting windows are smaller. The more reps he gets shooting with NBA players rushing towards him, the more consistent his results will be. But there's a catch in this catch and shoot problem. The thresholds he's trying to get to aren't just run-of-the-mill numbers. Last season, Conley and Alexander-Walker weren't just good. They were the best shooters in the team off the catch. Having 2 above 40% shooters to put beside Ant kept teams from getting creative with coverages and forced them either to commit to a double that could easily be punished with a couple swings, or sacrifice some poor soul to Ant-Man Island. Dillingham doesn't need to shoot like that in year 2, and honestly, expecting him to increase his percentage by over 10 points in one offseason is unrealistic, to put it mildly. It's not about matching the shooting gravity of Alexander Walker or Conley. It's about capitalizing on the scouting report. Based on his splits from last season, teams will be willing to give up those quick trigger catch and shoot looks. Offensively, that's it. If he shoots better, takes care of the ball, and makes those little plays at the right time, he could be a dangerous spark plug at the very least. But in order to stay on the court, he'll need to hold his own defensively. The 6'1", 176-pound guard was always going to be tested, and teams found success against him in his rookie season. He struggled to hold his own on the perimeter, lost matchups due to physicality, and occasionally rotated a second late. Dillingham's defensive rating was the worst of any Timberwolves reserve who played in more than 20 games. And without too many passing lane steals to offset his impact, opposing offenses looked like well-oiled machines with the overtime elite alumni on the floor. To be clear, it wasn't an effort problem. If anything, that unrelenting motor and competitive fire Dillingham played with were the most encouraging things about his defense. The main issues were size and strength. Most guards had an advantage in one of those two categories. Things were challenging enough in those slightly unbalanced one-on-one duels. And in a league that seems to be setting more and more screens by the week, it wasn't uncommon for him to get forced onto a wing scorer who could get to a spot and shoot right over him. The picture we've painted so far probably seems pretty whack, but it's important to remember that Dillingham doesn't need to be a defensive cornerstone, not with the offensive impact he projects to have. He just needs to avoid being the weak link in the chain. That starts with getting stronger at the point of attack, without seeing stars when a teammate isn't able to call them out well ahead of time. If he can manage that, it'll take an enormous amount of stress off that backline rotation. Now we'll call this next suggestion unrequested, half past noon consultation. If we were in the Timberwolves building, we would tell Dillingham to gamble like a down on his luck businessman at a horse race. His quickness and instincts can make him a dangerous pickpocket and passing lane bandit. And besides, we don't see a way that he becomes a lockdown defender given his physical limitations. Obviously, having a point of attack defender guessing with reckless abandon has the potential to put a defense in some compromising positions. But considering the circumstances, we think it's worth a shot. He's shown that he can set the pace on offense. Let's see if he can do it defensively. Regardless of whether or not Coach Finch chooses to listen to the advice of an outlet whose job does not depend on being right, we want to highlight one key and final point of evidence to keep you believing. Rob Dillingham turned 20 halfway through his rookie season. Throw the athletic freaks that you can think of out and ask yourself, how many players are fully formed before they can legally drink? He'll get stronger and he'll get more accustomed to the league's style of play. The question is, how much of a leap can you make in one summer? It's a lot to ask. It's not all that common for players to improve that many aspects of their game in their first offseason. That said, there's one thing that could help Dillingham close the gap between where he is and where he needs to be: consistent playing time. Minnesota played it safe in year 1, and given the roster makeup, that made sense. This year, it doesn't. Maybe they won't need Dillingham in the regular season, and if that bracket breaks the right way, they might not need him in round 1. But by the end of the playoffs, they'll have to find a rotational point guard who can add some juice to that offense. And more so than any player in a Wolves jersey this season, their comically quick playmaker has the weapons to do that. The first half of the season might be rocky. In fact, we're expecting it to be. But in the long term, those early season rough patches could pave the way for the postseason breakout Minnesota needs. They traded 2 first-round picks for a reason. I think it's time they let Rob Dillingham find his rhythm. So what do you think?